We don't make those decisions. I want to talk to you a little bit this morning. You know, I put a little title on these lessons so I can find them later on my computer. But if I title this one, it would be Such as I Have. You remember when, well, I might as well just read it. You know, Peter and John, they were coming to the, let's see, it's in Acts 3. Yeah, I got it marked. That's good, ain't it? Acts 3. And it starts at Peter and John went up together into the temple at the hour of prayer. And verse 2, and a certain man, lame from his mother's womb, was carried. The man was crippled all his life. And every day, it says daily, said he laid at the gate of the temple and he asked alms. Now, I looked that word alms up because all these years I thought it meant money. But it don't. I looked it up in the Greek, and what it means is compassion and tender mercy. He was asking people that come into that temple for compassion on him and to have mercy on him. If money was involved, that's fine, but that's what the word alms means. It never mentioned money. But anyway, verse 3, he saw Peter and John about to go into the temple, and he asked for alms. And Peter said, he fastening his eyes upon him, with John, said, look on us. And he gave heed unto them, expecting to receive something from them. And Peter said, silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. In the name of Jesus of Nazareth, rise up and walk. And he took him by the right hand and lifted him up. And immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. The man had never walked in his whole life. Strength come into his feet and his ankle bones, and he began to walk. And what did he do first? He began leaping, stood up and walked, and entered in with them to the temple, walking and leaping and praising God. And all the people saw him walking and praising God. And they knew him because he'd been laying there by the temple or someplace, you know, all of his life. They knew who he was. There's no question that it was a miracle. But I wondered, when Peter said, such as I have, and so I just couldn't help looking up to see what he had. He said, such as I have, so what did he have? And then where did he get it? He had it. What was it? Where did he get it? And so I found the answer in 1 Corinthians. Now, in 1 Corinthians 12, let's see, Acts, Romans, Corinthians, okay. 1 Corinthians 12. It talks about the gifts of the Spirit. And it talks about, verse 1, chapter 12, concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I would not have you ignorant. So he's getting ready to give a bunch of information. So, then he goes down to chapter 4, verse 4. Now there are diversities of gifts, or different gifts, by the same Spirit, and there are differences of administrations by the same Lord. There are diversities of operations. Then he begins to tell, by the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. Now here he starts in verse 8, and he begins to tell these gifts that God has given to man. He says in 8, for to one he is given by the Spirit the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit, To another, faith by the same Spirit. To another, the gifts of healing by the same Spirit. To another, working of miracles, then prophecy, and others discerning of spirits and divers kinds of tongues. To another, interpretation of tongues. But all these work that one and the self-same Spirit, dividing to every man several as he will. So as the Spirit wills, he uses men, and people have different gifts. But I'm thinking, what did Peter and John have to give this man? So you find it over there in verse 9. To another, faith by the same Spirit. He took that man by the hand and lifted him up. That was an action of faith. He believed at that point that that man was going to get up and walk. And that man got up and walked. And then the gift of healing at the same time was in one of them. I don't know which one, but there was a gift of healing. And the healing took place. So first you have, he says, whatsoever I hath, give I unto thee. He gave what God had given him. He gave him this faith, and he gave him this gift of healing. Now, a little farther. In Mark 16, we know the scripture says that the signs will follow them that believe. And it talks about things that will follow the people of faith. And none of these things, none of these gifts of the Spirit will operate without faith. Faith is the key thing that holds it all together, seems like. Now, these things that are mentioned in Mark 16 that will follow the children of God, the church. We know the scripture. They'll lay hands on the sick and they'll recover. You know, they'll speak with tongues. And if they drink any deadly thing, it won't hurt them. And it goes on and it lists the things that will follow, the signs that will follow the church. But every one of these signs come through these gifts. Without the gifts, none of these things in Mark 16 could be done. Because every one of them's beyond flesh. I mean, they're things that God He alone that does. If you're going to speak with new tongues, I mean, you can fake it. You know, I mean, you can pretend. And I've seen that happen. But in reality, you know, the true Pentecostal tongue comes from God Himself. Amen. And the gifts, the healing, you know, they lay hands on the sick and they'll recover. We can't do that. You know, doctors don't heal anything. The finest doctor cannot heal you. He can treat you. And he can open a pathway sometimes to healing, but he cannot do the healing. And any of these things, these signs, come through these gifts. But we have to realize that there's things that this crippled man done that the ordinary person may not do. The first thing that he done, it says, of course, was leap. You don't jump and leap because he felt that strength in his feet. But then what does it say he done? The next thing he done in Acts, I'm just going to go back and forth and take my time. I hope you don't get bored. If you get real bored, go in there and have you another donut. I like to just take my time because then that way I can make mistakes a lot slower that way. See, Acts chapter 3 is where I was at. Now look what he done first. First thing he done was leaping. He stood up and walked and entered in with them into the temple. The first thing he done really relating to Peter and John was he went to church with them. There had to be something there to cause him to want to go to church with this these guys, you know. Something happened, and he did not give them the credit for the healing, but they had something in their life that drew him. And so what did he do? He went into the temple with them, went into the prayer meeting with them, first thing. Okay, now listen to this. Verse 11. And as the lame man with his healed, which was healed, held Peter and John, all the people ran together unto them in the porch. But the second thing he done was grab hold of them and held them. Because there was something in their life that caused these gifts to work. It's really more important than the gifts. So I find my mind just keeps searching. I think, you know, sometimes somebody will be healed. You never see him again. And sometimes they'll be healed and think that you done it. Well, he didn't do either one. First thing you want to do is go fellowship with them. Wanted to be with them. So I thought, what is it that these men had that caused this man to want to be with them, to go to church with them, and to hold on to them, to love them like that? Because it's obvious he didn't give them any credit for the healing, because he was leaping and praising God for his healing. So there's something else in a person's life that is very valuable, very valuable. And I think, what I believe, is something that I found over in Galatians 5. And I believe that the gifts of the Spirit will operate without these other things. But you cannot, I believe it, I'm safe in saying this, you cannot build a church on a gift. Am I right, Gladys? You cannot build a church on a gift. I've seen it myself. Somebody will come up with a gift of discernment, and they can tell you all about yourself, and the church don't increase at all. And I've seen the place where somebody would be healed, and the church they'd blossom for a while, then go right back the way it was. But there has to be something else that takes place in the body of Christ that causes these men to go to church with you, go to prayer meeting with you, to be with you, to fellowship with you. And like this man did, to grab hold of you and love you. In Galatians 5, let's see this. Now, you know what it is. I mean, I don't have to tell you. You people read this Bible. After ask Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, right after 2 Corinthians. And you know which way I'm going. I'm going to the fruit of the Spirit. Now, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Galatians. Okay. Now the fruit of the Spirit is in 5, verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. That, I believe, is why this man was so connected to them people, to Peter and John. I have known people that didn't know more than 3 or 4 sermons. But because they loved their people and had these fruits in their life, that church was full. That makes the difference. And I see why this man just jumped up and just embraced them and went to the temple with them. But you can have a gift and not have the fruits. We've seen that, hadn't we? I remember somebody told me about a guy said, you know, it's strange. He loves God, but he hates people. That won't work. You know, he's talking about on the phone. I was talking to this guy in Memphis yesterday. We knew R.W. Shambach. He's talking about the way he was. You know, we'd be at a TV station or something, and after the filming was done, we'd all go out and eat. And Brother Shambach, well, he would be over there sitting down with the cameramen and all the regular people, and then what we would call the biggies. There's no such thing as a biggie, but, you know, the president of the network and his group would be in another table, but not Brother Shambach. He'd be over there with us and the musicians and the cameramen and people like that. What made his ministry work was the love of God in his life. There'd be somebody, I remember we was in a meeting one time, and way down the hall, when the meeting was over and we was getting ready to leave, and way down the hall, this little old girl down there hollered, Brother Shambach. And he said, yeah. He said, can I hug you? He said, yeah, girl, and went down that big long hall while everybody waited, see. And somebody gave the network a limousine, so the limousine was waiting. And Brother Shambach went and hugged that little girl. A little girl in ragged clothes. But that's what makes a ministry. That's what builds a church, I believe. And that's what made this gift work with Peter and John, with that crippled man. And I guarantee you, if you'd watch that man's life, he's probably in that temple every time the doors was open. Because he was treated right in the beginning. So, you can have the gifts and not have the fruits. But a gift is exactly what it says. It's a gift. When you receive a gift of the Spirit, it's totally mature at that time. All it has to do is to be stirred up. The gift of the Spirit that God gives you, one of the gifts that operates in each one of us, that gift is mature. You don't have to study to teach that gift anything. That gift don't grow. We grow into that gift, but that gift don't grow. That's the reason you can find somebody that just received Christ that can lay hands on somebody and then be healed just as well as the great evangelist. Because the gift is totally mature. It don't take maturity to operate in them gifts. But the fruits, now, that's a different story. The fruits are like a tree that has an apple on it, you know. The tree bears the apple. It starts out small, little by little receives nourishment until it grows into maturity. So the gifts are from God and are the same. But the fruits grow in your life, and it's up to us to cause these fruits to grow. And the gifts will operate along with these fruits in our life. If we want to be involved in the church being built, we have to develop these fruits of the Spirit. And one of them, of course, the first one I think is love. Now this crippled man, I guarantee you when John said, or Peter or John, one of them said, look on us. I think John said that. When he looked up at them, he probably felt that fruit from them. He probably felt that love. They wasn't there trying to sell him something. They wasn't there trying to put on a show, and they said, we don't have any money. It's not about money. He said, but such as we have, we give it to you. We don't sell it. We don't box it up and make a package deal. We don't put our name all over it. We don't do it. We just give it. And the young man received it, and I know that he felt the fruits of the Spirit in those men is the reason he wanted to fellowship with them. Now, everything works through faith. Amen. Now, Peter and John had the faith to look at him and say, look at us. I want to look right in your eyes. I want you to see us. And I want you to hear every word we're going to say. And he said that with the fruit of the Spirit to back it up, and the man knew it. And he didn't ask for no money or anything else, anything else, because what he got was sufficient. But this faith is listed all through in parallel with the gifts and with the fruits. You receive things from God by faith, and the works of the Spirit are done by faith. Faith is the principal thing. You're going to have to believe sometimes when you don't see nothing. You're going to have to, because that's the way it operates. And I've told you this story before. I was in a church years ago, and maybe some haven't heard it, and they was going to pray for the sick. And this lady stood up, and she was as white as this paper here. She said, the doctors just give me a few days to live. I'm eat up with cancer. I've got it all through my body. And you can see the preacher, he kind of got real serious. Called a bunch of people together, laid hands on the woman, and she just stumbled back to her seat like nothing happened. Now you're going to have to believe something that you don't see. Nobody in that church saw any improvement in that woman. Just days to live. And we got back to Brentwood, Franklin, to Betty Jean's office. As soon as we got in the door, her secretary said, you don't believe who's on the phone. This guy, the preacher at that church. And she said, where the lady had the cancer. He said, she is totally healed completely, not a bit of cancer in her body. And she said, he told me that the church is full. They're going to, faith operates all of these things. In faith, you're going to have to reach out and develop these fruits. And, it's not easy. Sometimes you're going to have to love somebody that's not lovable. You're going to have to forgive when you don't want to. You want to get even, You're going to have compassion on somebody that has done you wrong. But every time you make that choice, you develop these fruits in your life. And then, when your gift of the Spirit operates, the fruits will back it up. And you can build a church on fruits. I feel that in this church. I love hearing Gladys preach. I love the music and everything. But you know what we got that a lot of churches don't have? We'll stand around here 30 minutes after church and just talk. We don't run for the door. We want to spend time with each other. Because I believe in each one of us, God is developing that fruit. And I believe that's the way every church will grow. I believe that. And I believe that's in the place that wherever gift will flourish. I remember Paul Baggett up in Millersville. What a great man he was. But Paul Baggett never preached more than 3 or 4 sermons. I never heard him preach more than 3 or 4. Every time we'd go, if we was in a meeting somewhere with him, he would preach a sermon that he just preached 2 weeks ago. He didn't know a lot of sermons to preach. But he had something that I've been wanting for years. He loved them people. Church filled up. Not because of the sermons or the music or nothing, just because Paul Baggett had that fruit of the Spirit in his life. His son told us one time, he said, I didn't understand, Daddy. He said, there's a girl called from Alabama, miles and miles away. And she was crying and said, Brother Baggett, I need you to come and pray for me. And Paul Baggett told his son, you want to go with me? He said, sure. So they jumped in the car, drove for hours and hours and hours to get down in Lower Alabama where this girl was. Went in there and spent just a few minutes with her, prayed for her, turned around and drove all the way back hours and hours and hours. And his son told us, he said, I asked Daddy. He said, I don't understand. He said, I don't understand why you would spend all of that time driving down there for one little girl that wanted you to pray for. And he said, son, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. It's not working the gift of the Spirit at your convenience. It's working the gift that God give you in the place that He put you in. If you have to drive 2 days to get there, if He said go, you go. And I saw that in Betty Jean's life too. Sometimes I would get mad because I'd see people use her, and she'd never fight back. I'd get mad sometimes. Why don't you call that guy and tell him that you didn't get an offering? So they'd receive an offering but not give it to her. And that's happened, more than once. One time we had some friends there which kind of well off. And after church we went out to eat, and they said, well, did you get a good offering for tonight? And she said, well, I got so-and-so. And the lady was surprised. She said, Betty Jean, we put more than that in ourselves. So they kept most of the offering, And that goes on, and you hate it, but it's human nature gets into, flesh gets into everything, This man, I'm sure, had a need in the church, and so he kept the money, and that happened more than once. And Betty Jean would just say, well, God will make it up in our next meeting. And it happened like that for over 40 years, that God would make it up in the next meeting. But I believe it was because she did not fight it, because she was able to be done wrong and not get even. And she let it go. And that's another thing I wish I could learn, along with Paul Baggett's love. Because that's the bottom line. It really is. I have no idea where I'm at with these notes. I make these notes and end up throwing half of them away and marking them out and reprinting them, and I don't know what all. But I'll talk to you about the difference in gifts and fruits. The fruits in your life, because they grow, they will reproduce themselves. You can actually love somebody to the point of where they will love you back. You can have compassion on somebody to the point of where they will have compassion on somebody else. You can actually grow those fruits in another person's life. You can't do that with gifts. You can't say, I'm going to give you the gift of healing. No, God gives those gifts. You don't give nobody a gift, a spiritual gift. God gives them out. And the Bible says according to how He wishes, that's the way He gives them out. But fruits, you can reproduce the fruit of the Spirit in somebody else. And one of the main places you can reproduce a fruit in your life is with your children. Because you're always going to have that in the background of your mind. Such as I have, give I unto thee. If you're an old grouch, you might raise old grouchy children. Because such as you have, you want to give to them. If you tell lies, you might be raising a child that has a problem with the truth. But on the other hand, if you have these fruits that's listed here in Galatians 5, you can reproduce them in your children. I saw that a long time ago with my dad. When my mom, she was in her Dad died when he was 82, so it was after he died, and we was all talking. She called him R.B. His name was Robert Benjamin. And she said, just out of nowhere, she said, R.B. was the most honest man I ever met. Now, this is somebody that had been together for 60-some years. Watched everything each one of them do. Knew them inside and out. She said he was the most honest man I ever met. And I find myself wanting to be that way, see. I find myself, if I tell you a lie and I find out about it, I can't stand it. You know, it kills me. And I thank God for that. If I was to take something from you that didn't belong to me, I feel bad about that. Because he reproduced some of that fruit in my life. And when there were 6 kids in our life, there's nobody on drugs, no alcoholics, nobody ever done prison time. As far as I know, I could believe every one of them anytime they said. And I believe that's the fruit that Daddy sowed in us. And Mom the same way. But I never forgot that she said R.B. was the most honest man I ever met. Well, I wish that when I was that old, somebody would say that about me, you know. But anyway, I get way off from these notes. I mean, I don't even know where I'm at. I get to talking and think of things that I wish I had in the notes, and they're not there. Anyway, I mentioned that the fruits will bear fruit. Now, the conversation between Peter and John and this crippled man could have been different. He could have, when they walked in, said, "Hey, you got any money on you?" I said, "Well, we don't have any silver or gold." Well, the crippled man said, "Well, forget it. If you don't have any money, forget it." And it could have been that way. If it wasn't God ordained that it happened the way it happened, and the gifts of the Spirit was not going to be manifested there, and they didn't have no fruit in their life to go along with it, this could have happened. The crippled man had every right in the world to be bitter. He never walked a day in his life. People carried him everywhere he went. He could have said, "I don't want to be healed." See, I'll have to go to work then if I'm healed. I just want to sit here the rest of my life. A man in his fleshly mind will think those things. He might say something like, "I don't want to be healed because I might lose my disability check." You can reason yourself right out of a miracle if you're not careful. Peter and John could have said this. They could have said, "Such as I have, I'm going to keep for myself." But the base word there is, "I give to thee." Such as I have, I'm going to write it in a book and sell it. Or it could be a respecter of persons. Such as I have is for Christians only. I don't give it to these bums laying here on the street. That's what the old flesh man probably would say if he had the gift to give. So it could have been that way. Knowing human nature, could have happened. I remember up in Kentucky, one of the ladies we went out to eat with after church she said, "You ain't going to believe this." Said, "We went over to pray for this man, and he said, 'I don't want you to come and pray for me because I'm getting this disability check, and if I'm healed, I won't get any money.'" See, now, you wonder why somebody don't get healed sometimes, don't you? I think, well, if I was God, I wouldn't heal him either. The old grouchy thing. He's going to live off everybody else the rest of his life. But not this crippled man. He jumped up and walked and praised God and went to church with the guys, Okay. I keep going through these notes like they're important, and I can't remember half of them. If we don't develop the fruit in our life, we will probably not operate the gifts. If we don't develop fruit to go along with the gift that God gives us, and we don't develop these things in Galatians 5, then we will eventually stop operating in that gift because it don't reproduce. Fruit reproduces and gifts don't. Okay. The people in your church and the people around you, the people in your home, on your job, everywhere, they look for this fruit. They look for the fruit long before they look for a gift. Because they know if you love them, that's the most important part, if you care about them. I've talked enough. Let me get and sit down here. But years ago I heard this and remembered it. And I thought, this probably will go along with what the point I'm trying to make today. It says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You've probably heard that. I heard it years ago. I never forgot it. So it looks to me like the bottom line is to develop these fruits in your life and let God give the gifts. Don't chase after gifts, Don't try to be the big man that raises himself above the people. Get down there with the people and let the fruit grow. Anyway, I hope I haven't bored you. But there's things in our life that are more than important to a person that is a preacher, pastor of a church. I know that the pressure is on sometimes for them to build a crowd, not because they desire a big church and they can be above somebody else, but because they care for people. And the more people you have in your church, the more people you can love and have, you can help. And that's the motive of most preachers in the world today. Gladys is like that. I watch her. I watch Gladys. I listen to her radio program. I watch her and appreciate her. But if there's anything that I could leave with you this morning, and I hope I hadn't taken too much time, is to develop each fruit in your life listed in Galatians 5 and expect a problem to come. Because if there's anything the devil hates, is that you put on the mind of Christ, or you be transformed into the image of Christ. And that's what these fruits do. All of these fruits of the Spirit were manifested in the life of Christ. And that's what he wants us to do. Well, I'm going to sit down, and I hope that some of the things I said here this morning you may remember. And I hope I learned something. Bless your heart. Thank you.